Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Well, thanks for showing up tonight. My name is Tony Polizzi. I'm the director for Startup Grind Denver, and in the back here is my co-director, Colleen Cosme. And I have some other folks here that are helping out. David Jennings over here, he's helping out. Liana Orenstein, she may be downstairs. Haley Holman's downstairs. My two daughters that you all met, they're helping me out tonight. And then we have, I want to recognize a couple other folks. We have Terry from Noble Productions, he's doing audio tonight. And then we have these wonderful young men, Nehemiah, George, and Adam from Warren Tech, and their school in Jefferson County. So they did the last video. Last time we did an awesome job when we had Brian, so it was really, really fun. So I have a couple of announcements. First, and the next person I want to thank is Conversant for allowing us the opportunity to come here tonight, and to Samantha and the folks at iTriage for helping us with the food and beer. So thank you very much, Samantha, for all your coordination. Appreciate it. I also have my wonderful wife here, Liz, in the back. Hi, Liz. So anyways, there's a couple things I want to announce. There's a video in here that I'd like for all of you at some point in time. It's in this back room. If it's not running, we'll get it to run. I'd like to have you watch it. It kind of talks a little bit about Startup Grind and where it got, not really how much where it got started, but for those of you who don't know, started several years ago in Mountain View with two guys out of a garage, because everything in Silicon Valley starts in a garage, and they're no different. So they started this group of just having these fireside chats and getting people to come and listen to them. And they did it for a while, and then they found out after a while they didn't want to do it anymore, and then once they stopped, everybody came back and said, well, you really need to keep doing this. So they did. So about 4 years ago, is that right, Colleen? 4 years ago, 3 years ago, they had maybe six chapters, and most of them were in California. Today there's over 80 chapters, 30 of which are outside the United States. So last week, Colleen and myself had the opportunity to go out to the directors meeting in Mountain View, and we are sponsored by Google for Entrepreneurs. So Mary Grove, who runs that program, along with some of the folks at Microsoft, were there to kind of help us out as well. Got to meet all these directors and what they're doing all over the world and all over the United States. And it was actually very, very impressive. So I had, a little over 1,000 plus some people at the event. We had people that were there speaking that were from LinkedIn, and people that helped start Twitter, and MC Hammer was there, and all this kind of stuff. And and I'll tell you what, he had the best talk of all the ones I listened to. I would highly suggest, if you have an opportunity, go to Startup Grind, go to the video section, and look at some of the videos from the past and from this last week. They're actually very, very good. Found it very, very helpful. So we're doing that here. We did our first one couple weeks ago with Brian Leach from Ibotta, and we're having several booked now going forward. So we have several months booked forward, Pat and Mark and those guys, and we have 3 more coming up in May, June, July. In May, we're going to have a woman entrepreneur, which is going to be awesome, because there's going to be Google for Entrepreneurs is sponsoring women entrepreneurs, which is really, really cool. So we're really excited about it. And that announcement will come out very, very soon. So keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll get that going. So, hope you all had a good time eating, and those of you who don't know where the restrooms are, they're out that door, and just take a left all the way around. So what I'd like to do right now is, we have a tradition, and we learned about this at Startup Grind, and I'm going to introduce Peter here in just a minute, but when I do, you all need to stand up and cheer and scream as loud as you can, okay? Because Peter's here on his own, and we asked him to be here, and he's volunteering his time, so we want to make sure he's welcome. So I'm going to read a little bit about Peter, because I forgot my piece of paper that I would do. So, anyways, Peter Hudson is he's a medical physician, and he's also an entrepreneur. He's been doing this for a little over 20 years. He's currently working. They got purchased by Aetna, and so he's heading up their digital strategy for consumer products and digital strategy. And so prior to that, when he started iTriage was about 2008. And so really it's around, if you haven't looked at the app, you should download it. It's awesome. It's really to help folks understand and manage their health care and the ability to understand what's going on in their lives. He's a current resident of Denver, and he has 2 children, his wife. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Hudson. Everybody say, woo!
Thank you.
All right. Make sure your mic's
That's a
working
great
good.
welcome. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for showing up again. I appreciate it. So the way we start this out is really to kind of get an idea of kind of who you are. So if you wouldn't mind spending a little time on your background, kind of where you grew up, kind of some nuances around that, kind of take us to a journey up until about college.
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, which has really small ski hills, and became passionate about skiing when I turned 13. I think I skied 70 times that year. I think the biggest hill was maybe 200 feet tall, and I knew that there must be something better when it came to skiing. So after high school, I went to Colorado College for undergraduate, came out, and I'd gotten into ski racing, so I skied on the college ski team, and loved Colorado, so enjoyed the outdoors. I still love it, and really am excited to call Colorado home.
Thanks for coming out to Colorado.
Yeah.
So of those 70 times, did you do that on one hill at one day?
Yeah.
Or was it 70 times?
It was like 70 days of skiing, like 70 runs, All
All right, with those 200-foot hills, I'm sure you went
Yeah.
up and down pretty fast. Okay, so you're in Colorado College. You come out here, you like it, and what were you doing when you were there? What were you studying?
So I had grown up in Wisconsin. My dad was a biochemist and professor, and he got a Fulbright scholarship when I was in 7th grade, so we moved to Guatemala for a year. And I remember we all hid from our parents because we didn't want to leave that day. So I think we climbed a tree and refused to come down. They finally, I think they threatened to cut the tree down, put us in the car. We drove all the way to Guatemala. We lived there for about a year, and had a great experience. Learned a ton about what it's like to be in a country that you have lots of options, lots of opportunities. And learned what it's like to be live in a foreign country where, you're a minority and you see lots of, lack of opportunity and unfortunate people around you. So it's a great formative experience. I think, after that experience, I was very interested in getting involved in understanding a little bit more about what political environment had created that situation. It was really eye-opening for me. So in college, I studied Latin American poli-science. So I was a poli-science major. In fact, Liz Cheney was in my class, and we used to argue all the time on things in class. And now she is the former vice president's daughter and political correspondent on TV. And what I realized at the end of it, as I was about a year from graduating college, was that I had 2 options. I could either teach Latin American political science, or I could write a book about dictators, which was kind of the study of Latin American political science. And so I also had seen lots of things, in the third world, and I wanted to do something that would help out a little bit more, and would be more directly involved in helping in some way. So I decided to become a pre-med student, and I didn't have enough time to finish everything, so I went to summer school and crammed everything in, and I did the Stanley Kaplan test and passed out of physics. I took 1 semester of physics. I passed out of the second one because I think I just knew all the questions. I don't know if I knew anything about it other than that, and got into CU Med School, and that was really outside of skiing and having fun in college, what I focused on.
So you're going to college and you're sitting there, and you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur? Or when was it that you decided, or when was the first inclination in your life at that point where you said, God, I think I could do something different, or I want to be able to make a difference in a way outside of what my studies are, or what I've been pushed to do or focused to do from school perspective, or from maybe it's from your family?
It's interesting. I had no idea what an entrepreneur was. I had no knowledge of what it must be like to start a business, run a business. I think we had a few friends. Most of our friends were in the educational profession. My dad was a college professor. My mom was a first grade teacher. I think we had a friend who ran a tree service, a couple other businesses.
They're the ones who were going to cut down the tree?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had really no exposure to being an entrepreneur growing up. I had no exposure to going into, I've worked in investment banking. I had no exposure to that. The only thing I thought about was doing something that was professional and that you could, go to graduate school and get a degree and do something that you liked and that had a, good standard of living. So it's interesting. I mean, I haven't really thought back on that, but there was no start a business idea growing up at all. Never thought about it.
So when you were, you had said before that there was at a time where you decided when you were, I think you were working in the emergency room, I believe, and you said there was a time where I can't remember the exact story, maybe you can refresh my memory here, but you saw things weren't done well enough in the medical profession as far as what things were going on, and you made a decision, or I'm thinking at some point you said, this needs to be fixed. So that's kind of what's the beginning, I guess, of iTriage?
Yeah, I think that, working in the ER and working night shifts and weekends and holidays and seeing a lot of pain and suffering is a great time to think about what's broken and also doing something else. It took me year after year of doing that before I actually had an idea. But I think probably for me, a couple formative things were training in the Bay Area. And so I did residency from 1992 to 1996. So a few things happened in the Bay Area around then. I remember in 92 or 93, I was having coffee with my brother, and the stock market was like 1,200, and it had just risen to that, and we were thinking, wow, could it really go to 1,500 maybe? I remember I was on a fishing trip when Netscape went public, and that was kind of the start of a lot of craziness in the Bay Area. And so watching that as a doc who was training in residency and taking care of patients in a county system, I realized then that there was this really interesting thing called software, and organizing electrons was a very interesting business model and didn't require a lot of inventory or capital like some other businesses. And it certainly wasn't like working as a physician, seeing patients on a shift basis. It's very different. You could create equity in what you're doing. You could create value. You could scale what you wanted to do. And so I started to think that was an interesting area. I got involved in a technology project in residency where we were frustrated because nobody would ever come in and help us in the ER, so it was really hard to get specialists to come in. Across the Bay, there were too many specialists, and they all wanted to see all the patients in San Francisco. But in Oakland, where the patients were uninsured, it was really hard to get anybody ever to come in, and it took forever to get radiology tests and things like that done. So we stole an ultrasound machine one day and brought it into the ER and just started using it on people. It was a great place to do stuff like that. And you could suddenly figure out, what a gallbladder looked like, and if there were gallstones in a gallbladder and they had right upper quadrant pain, then you didn't have to send them to radiology. And we used it to, look and find blood vessels and put, catheters in those blood vessels a little easier. So it was kind of the first video games on people. And and so that, that was kind of fun, and that opened up my mind that I could use some of the skill set and subject matter expertise that I had developed as a doctor, and thought about, wow, here's a problem. I can't get these studies done. My ER's filling up. Everyone's screaming and throwing up in the hallway, and I need to get rid of them. And if I could just get a study done faster, then maybe they would go away. Or I could send them upstairs to surgery, or give them medicine, something. Like day after day, you think like that. And so that was really my first, that was sort of my first innovation idea, was using ultrasound at the bedside. And so we ended up writing a book about it, the first textbook on it. My wife's an artist, so she illustrated all these pictures of, how fluid layers in the peritoneal cavity when you have a stab wound and stuff like that. And we published that book, and now that's a big business, and there's, ultrasounds at bedside, there's ultrasounds on iPhones, and it was interesting just to see that evolution. So a little bit of experience, in the practice where we were, practicing cowboy medicine a little bit, and watching software evolve, and Netscape go public, and everything like barbecue.com, getting funded, and I thought, wow, there's a lot of problems in healthcare. Why aren't any of these people focused on healthcare? And that was sort of how I got interested in being a software entrepreneur the first time.
So you're interested, what was the first step that you took to move in that direction? What were some of the things that you thought of? You said you didn't know what entrepreneurship was. You didn't know. So what were some of the things that you did in order to either educate yourself or, get somebody to say, hey, I have this great idea. What am I going to do with it? How can you help me?
So I had a friend who had created, his model was he would create software, like a software prototype, and then he'd go pitch it to companies, and they'd buy it, and then he'd build it. And this was like sort of mid-90s. There wasn't a lot of venture capital going on at that time. And he had created something called Server Manager for Apple. So it was an embedded software product on the Apple servers. And it was when John Scully was at Apple, and they were shipping all sorts of third-party software. So he got paid every time a server got shipped. And he lived in Paris and went out to dinner every night, and every time I was going to the ER shift, he was out with my friends. and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like, how does that work? In order to actually make an income, I have to go do something. And so this license model sounds pretty interesting. So one day, Steve Jobs came back to Apple when they bought Next Software. And Phil, all of a sudden, had 100% of his revenue stream cut off, which was interesting. And so he was really interested in doing something different. And he was the person that I knew that really embodied a software entrepreneur. He's doing great things today. He's actually in the healthcare field now. And so we got together, and I was frustrated by documenting patients and the charting work that you had to do in the emergency department. Once we got out of residency, which was a county system, I went into the military and practiced for 4 years as a payback for medical school, which they paid for. And in the military, you had to either use this really archaic DOS-based system, which was horrible, to document your charts, or you had to write a lot of notes. And then when I would moonlight at other places, I'd have to dictate, and you'd have to sit on the phone for 5 minutes and sort of stream of consciousness, tell a story about a patient. 2 weeks later, get a note back saying you missed 3 things that you're supposed to document. So I got very intrigued in sort of productivity and efficiency and documenting a patient visit. And it was right when regulation started occurring I see everyone's eyes glazing over. I think this is, I've gone off on too much of a tangent. But the first sort of series of healthcare regulations occurred where you had to document certain things or you didn't get paid. And so I thought that's a great potential software solution. And so that's when I first started getting interested, and I started creating data that rolled up into forms that people could use, structured documentation instead of making a phone call or writing, tons of information. And so you could see more patients, be more productive, get to people faster, treat them, and, get them either home or to a bed upstairs faster.
So iTriage started in 2008. What did you do to get to, did you do a prototype first? Did you do what you just talked about, have that do first? Or did you just pitch an idea to somebody and say, here's what the idea I have, I want to go build this thing, can you help me out? So give us a little history, if you will, on kind of the nuances around how you did it and maybe, what you learned during that process.
It was interesting. So Wayne and I, who's my co-founder, he's another ER doc, and we've known each other since the early 90s when I was a med student. He was this cool resident who knew everything and let me suture people and stuff like that. And so he ended up moving to California. I moved to a different part of California, completely forgot each other existed, and then we ended up coming back and practicing in the same group in Denver. And after coming back, I was, practicing, working on, helping the group sort of restructure itself, restructure some of the finances, invest in some areas that we could, do some better things as a business to run our practice. So billing company, management company, et cetera, et cetera. And Wayne was one of those guys who was just great to work with. And so our sort of foundational way of how we evaluate people that we work with is that can you do a night shift with them? Because night shifts are really lonely, and patients can come in all at once and be really hard to take care of. And you need somebody that actually can, see all those patients right alongside you, be very productive, have fun at the same time, even though you're all exhausted. And so Wayne was one of those guys that I could do a night shift with. He would send me home early all the time. I'd send him home early, and so we just got along. And he went and got an MBA, so he actually knew some business, which I thought was very strategic. And so we had been talking about lots of different ideas after seeing recurrent problems in the acute care space in the emergency department. People that would come in for very minor things that could have been treated with a Dr. Spock book, or people that had gone to an urgent care down the street with a heart attack and came in by ambulance, with a really bad situation and probably higher mortality as a result. And we started thinking, why don't people know some of the stuff we know? Just a little subset, but a couple data points that would help them make a better decision right at that point in time, that they know they had to do something and they weren't sure really how to act. And so we started talking about that and thought about web-based models and marketplaces for healthcare and pricing and transparency and a lot of the same themes that we've been struggling with in healthcare for years. But it was really when the iPhone came out. So I was at Palm, then Handspring, then early iPhone adopter, and I liked the access to information that it would give you and the user interface. And so when the App Store came out, I thought, this is it. For the first time in the history of the world, there's a personal computing device you carry with you at all times. It has a great UI, UX. It can connect to vast sets of data. It didn't at the time, but I knew it would have to have GPS. And I thought, wow, you could really build this interesting, action-oriented, very focused healthcare utility. And so I took an iPhone and I traced the phone and I started, doing my own sort of very primitive Visio and mocking up some wireframes of what I thought the product would look like. And so I called Wayne up one day and showed him these documents, and he said, I like that idea, let's do this. So we, right then, decided to start a company. We drove down to the Bank One that used to be in Albertsons and started a bank account. I remember right at that time we're like, well, how much money should we put in? And Wayne said, well, we need to have somebody who's in charge, and this started out and was something that you thought about, and I'm totally into it, let's do it, but but let's think about, we need leadership from the very beginning. So it was very, very mature and thoughtful concept on his part, and it's, we've been a great partnership ever since. So, that's when we started. We then embarked on, how do we build this? We have a couple pieces of paper and that's it. I still have those pieces of paper. And we started looking for contractors that knew how to build apps, which, this market was now 3 months old. And there were a few of them out there. So we found a contracting group that agreed to build our first app for like $20,000. And then we realized we needed a lot of content. So we needed provider directory, where all the hospitals were, the urgent care. So we focused on acute care first. And then we realized we needed a lot of medical content too. And the idea was to answer really 2 core questions. What could I have and where should I go? Because we thought those 2 questions created a lot of problems for people every day, all around the world, effectively. So we thought, well, how hard can medical content be to build? We're doctors, right? We do this every day. All we have to do is write down what we're seeing. So we embarked on a process of creating a taxonomy of information relating symptoms to potential conditions, and then descriptions of the conditions, the symptoms related to them, the treatment, et cetera, et cetera. And so we really structured, a data model for content. And this was after looking at licensing content, which generally charged you a lot of money, more money than we had, and then charged you every time a new user used it. And we thought, well, we're going to have millions of users really quickly because this is an app. We're going to put it on the App Store. It's going to go viral, and there's no way we want to pay that kind of money. So we figured, let's build it ourselves. And the last reason we did that was most of the content was not really action-oriented. It was really about giving you enough information to keep reading and go to the next page and the next page and the next page, because media and advertising models were the way that this content had grown up that was licensed. So we looked at it differently. We're like, let's get the best information in the shortest amount of words that we can give you, because your chest is hurting, right? Or you have a cut on your arm. You don't want to read volumes. You want to know what to do. So that's how we started out, and that led to really a prototype we're about to release, and that's when we raised our first money.
So go walk through that raising the money part. You had the prototype. Where'd you go to do that? How did you guys prepare for that? The 2 of you. I'm assuming the 2 of you did this work together. How did that? Would Wayne help you with that? Who was kind of directing that? Were you kind of doing it together? Did you go to different places to find out where to go and how to do it? Or
I think the best. So first of all, we raised money in January of '09, which was not a great time. And, a lot of people lost their jobs. The stock market was crashing. I think, dropped like 1,000 points in September, previous to that time. And, but what I started to realize is when the stock market's up, people have free cash flow and can invest in things. When the stock market is going way down, people are looking for private investment. So it's really never a bad time, I think, if you have a good idea and you have, people that might want to invest in you. So we were lucky. We had a lot of doctor friends, and they knew us, and they knew that we were, decent at business at least, and we were passionate about what we wanted to do. And when we showed them the product, they were really interested. They thought it worked pretty well, and it looked like it solved the problem we were trying to fix. And so we raised about $400,000 in about 2 weeks in January, and we did a PPM. I wrote up a PPM and a pro forma, and that's all we did. And we did an LLC because we figured if we lost everybody's money, at least they get to claim the losses. So it was a little different than your typical, C Corp investment model, and it served us well for the entire time until we were acquired.
So $400,000 in investment. When you guys are thinking about how you're going to provision this out, get customers, what were some of the things that you guys went through to talk about how to do that best? How did you kind of maybe give us a story about that?
Well, we thought that if you built a great technology and had some kind of Sentinel PR event, you would, be like that ad in the late 90s where they launch a website and the numbers start growing, and then you have headaches about supporting it, right? Because it's gotten so big. What we soon realized was that was never going to happen. And even though the app market was new and it was a growing space, there were still only 5 million people with iPhones. So there wasn't a lot of a target audience to go after. And we thought, well, we have $400,000. That's just a massive amount of money to raise. This is going to last forever. We're going to cash flow in no time, and it's going to be great. And so remember, we launched in March of '09, and the first day we had 50 downloads. And we were kind of studying the numbers thinking, it just can't be right. And the next day we had 35 downloads. And after that it started, kind of petering along at the same number. And so we realized we had to invest in marketing and try to get the word out. And so we started talking to people. We retained a PR firm. We thought, well, a PR firm, they're just going to connect us with all the right people. And as soon as we talk to them, they're going to think this is amazing, and we'll have a Sentinel event, and it'll be all over. And so I remember we went and met with Walt Mossberg in Washington, D.C. And we met with him for an hour and showed him the app. And he said, we'll do a hospital search. And so we do a hospital search. And George Washington Hospital is not there. That's where he went for his heart attack. And so, thank God he never wrote an article about us, because it would have been horrible. So we were still very early. So, don't go to a guy like that when you're still early in your company and learning. But we had a New York Times article, and I think some other Wall Street Journal article, a bunch of local press. The Business Journal here in Denver has always been really good to us. And that sort of started things. And we saw spikes, and then the download rate would go down afterwards. And so we realized we had to do something different to sustain that. And so we started thinking about how we were going to sell and make money on the app, because it's free to consumers. We started out 99 cents for consumers, and we rapidly realized that if you went to free, you got 10x the amount of downloads. So even 99 cents is just, it's not it's a huge barrier for people downloading. It's crazy when you think about it. But we went to free, and then we had a business model that, we had advertising opportunities. We had an idea to work with providers, so hospitals and doctors, to help help them connect to patients that were looking for care, because we were really trying to solve a consumer need of what could I have and where should I go, and the where should I go matters to hospitals. We knew that mattered because we were on the receiving end as doctors. We had a bunch of other sort of ideas as business models, all of which have actually kind of come to fruition. But the first thing we did was went to Centura, where we worked, and Ken Bacon was the CEO of Littleton Hospital. And I remember we got an appointment with him, and we'd never seen him other than talking about our performance in the ER. So going and pitching an app was interesting. But as we left the meeting, he wanted to invest in it. He said, "This is great. I can totally see where this is going, and if people ever adopt these smartphones, this might be an interesting technology." So he was our first customer, and bless his heart, it was awesome, and they're still a customer today. And so we started advertising, essentially, or allowing Littleton Hospital to say, hey, we're Littleton Hospital, this is what we're good at, here's what our facility looks at, here's how to map it, here's our phone number, here's pictures and information on all the different service lines we have. And we noticed that people picked Littleton Hospital more frequently because there was information on it. And all the other hospitals in our system, we had everything because we knew consumers would need, any option. We didn't want somebody with a heart attack to drive past a hospital because we didn't have it in our system. So we had all the hospitals, but the ones that had information were ones that people felt more comfortable going to. And so we were like, wow, this might work. And then I got introduced to a guy at HCA, which is one of the biggest hospitals, or the biggest hospital system in the country. Another just very fortuitous thing. And I remember calling him, and he said, "Hey, I'm still in a meeting. I can't really talk." And I said, "Well, this is only going to take 2 minutes." He goes, "Okay, go." And so I gave him a 2-minute spiel, and he said, "Okay, call this guy in Florida. We're going to try it out in Florida first." And so I called, and we got a 12-hospital system deal for an HCA group down in southern Florida. And they were experimenting with something called wait times. So everyone's probably seen wait times by now, but back in 2009, wait times were completely new. So the concept of showing how busy an ER or urgent care practice is. And so we added all the wait times for the South Florida area of about 12 hospitals. And it was coming, we used RSS feeds, and we had to actually, we sold, it was back to my earlier days, we sold it, and then we had to figure out how to do it. And so this data was pumped in, and it was changing every 15 minutes, and we're like, wow, this is kind of cool. You can, what could I have? Let me look it up. Let me look at my symptoms. Now the condition. Now based on that condition, let me find the right kind of place to go. Now I'm looking for an ER, and it says 5-minute wait time. And all the other ERs in the area don't have wait times. Well, guess what happened? Lots of people went to the hospitals that were good at delivering care quickly, because going to the ER is tough. And so HCA saw a 7% increase in volume with their wait time. And ER patients are expensive. They're $1,500 to $2,500 of revenue, and between 12 and 18% of them get admitted. And the average revenue for an admission is $13,000. So it was that little wait time made a difference.
So was there a time when you and Wayne are sitting around and you saw those numbers go down and you looked at each other and went, do we still do this? Do we keep going? Was there any doubt at some point where like, man, this ain't going to work? Or you were just like, we just got to do this much more?
There's been challenges all along the way. I mean, I could say, we probably almost went out of business a lot of times. Our model was we would raise about 10 months of money, and our goal was to double our enterprise value, and we'd always raise only 20% of our company. So, first fundraise, we did that. We figured it would last us 10 months. We raised money again in October of 2009, and then we raised money again in about 12 months later. And so we did that model every time, and that worked out pretty well. But there were lots of times that, you don't know what's going to happen. But I think we just have always believed that there was a need for this, that the people that used it were getting the right kind of benefit from it. And we started getting reviews in, which is really cool about mobile technology. So when I first started developing technology in my first company in the late 90s, it was CDs, and it was it was stuff like that. And there was no review. You didn't get any information about what people thought of your products. As soon as we had an app on the App Store, we started getting all these reviews, and we read them religiously. In fact, every morning I wake up and I still read all our reviews. So we've had 100,000 reviews, and I've read every single one of them. And every day it would be like, well, this doesn't work, or crashes, or whatever the problem is, you address it immediately, and then you re-release your product, and it really helped us. But there's been lots of times that things didn't look very good, but we always felt that people were using it for the right reason, that it mattered, and it was a problem we were passionate about selling, or passionate about solving, and we'd find a way to make it work.
Cool. So you mentioned passion. There's a lot of folks that I've listened to over the last, I don't know how many months about talking to entrepreneurs like yourself and co-founders, and passion comes up a lot. Is there something else in your journey so far, maybe it was outside of just your own personal need, if you want, or passion or desire to get this done, that helped you get through some of those times? Was there a mentor or somebody else that said, look, Peter, you can do this? Or, who are some of your champions?
Well, I think, probably number one is my wife. So, I was a doctor. I was running a medical practice. I was doing okay. And I said, hey, honey, I'm going to quit and and start this company. And, we just raised some money, but we're not going to take salaries. And so she's a painter, and she said, well, I'll just start painting more. And she sells her art. And actually her career sort of took off during that time, but she really stepped up and supported our family. So I don't think she ever expected to support her physician husband, painting horses and cattle and selling them, but she's done remarkably well. So she's a huge supporter, and my kids are like passionate about the company and starting a company, and I think it's been really good for them because they know that you can just have an idea, get passionate about it, and go for it. And it may not work out, but they've seen it work out. So I think it's a good role model, and they've been really supportive because I've traveled an enormous amount compared to being an ER doc. So beyond that, there's been lots of people along the way from people in medicine. Chuck Saunders, who was my recent boss and the boss that I had when we were acquired by Aetna, was one of the founders of Healthion, and just a fabulous guy. And I'm working with a new executive, Dewana Lewis, now at Aetna, who's just fantastic. Mark Bertolini, who's the CEO of Aetna, was really our champion. Sort of from the beginning, very passionate about consumer technology and empowering people to make better decisions. He's been a fantastic, person to get to know and mentor at times as well.
So talking about Aetna, you got acquired 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, almost 2.5 years ago.
So what was that like? Did you get a phone call and, hey, we want to buy you, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I go every year to this conference called the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference. So if you're in healthcare, that's where most of the deals get done. Almost every equity group, public company, private company, emerging venture-backed company goes to J.P. Morgan. So it's like all these healthcare people descend on Union Square. And it's a great place to network. So if you're in healthcare, you should definitely go. And you don't need a ticket. You can, just sort of go to all the meetings peripheral to it. I had met some people that were joining Aetna at the time and really interested in building a technology, practice and group within Aetna, and doing very strategic things like helping providers take risk and build, ACOs, or connecting the medical information through healthcare information exchange, or doing something for the consumer. So that's really where the conversation started.
So you guys won the, you were CNN's Entrepreneur of the Year in 2012. And you were also CTA's, Colorado Technology Association's Entrepreneur 2013. Those are some pretty awesome honors. But the one I want to talk about is the call that you got from the First Lady to go to the State of the Union.
Yeah, we've been, seriously humbling things, like all three of those things. We're just trying to do what we believe in and, hire people that are smarter than us. And we've, there's a few people here and they're definitely smarter than us. And that's been a very effective strategy. And staying very mission-oriented and focused. So if you're a software developer and you want to do something cool, definitely call us or call Sam afterwards. But those kind of recognitions are, there's a lot of companies that are deserving of those. So I don't know how we were picked, but it was certainly nice. The Entrepreneur of the Year thing this year was really cool because we're part of a big company. We're part of a $50 billion company, and we're still seen as entrepreneurial. So I don't think, the lesson from that is you can be part of a big company and be entrepreneurial. You just have to have the right arrangement with, with the people that supervise you. I've been lucky. I think that's the ER doc, take no grief type attitude. But the White House, so we've been able to do a lot of stuff with the White House, which has been a lot of fun. The first thing we did was they had this open data initiative back in 2009 or 10, something like that, where they started making our data that the government has in healthcare open and available. And they went out to a bunch of entrepreneurs and said, hey, can you consume this data and build something in 2 months? And if you can come to this event and show it. And so we thought, wow, that sounds cool. Maybe we'll get to meet somebody. And so we got this API for federally qualified health centers. And we thought, there's no other way to find low-income clinics if you're searching for, health care and you don't have any money to pay for it. But there's all these low-income clinics that get government funding and they're available to people. And, the people that need them don't know how to find them a lot of times. So we integrated that and they thought it was pretty cool. So they invited us and they talked about us at this event. So we were kind of hooked. It's a great idea. So we kept looking for new data sets that we could add to the application. And it was great because they were free. They were government owned. They really wanted to highlight companies that were entrepreneurial and working in a partnership with the federal government. So it was a great relationship on both sides. And then we started getting calls because we used their data and it got, we integrated their data and it got used by people. And by this time we had 1 million or 2 million downloads and people were using our product for real reasons, looking for health care and navigating their own illnesses. And people were finding these low-income clinics and they were finding substance abuse centers and mental health centers. That was another data set we consumed. And, in the hundreds of thousands of times a year. And so that became a great example of taking a government data set, making it valuable, and actually getting use. And then we started actually, having a revenue model that worked and building a business. And so that was another sort of milestone for them. And so along the way, we are a good example. We're kind of, one of our strategies was be the poster child for as many people as you can. And so, building a network type technology like we built, there's a lot of people that could embrace what you're doing and use you as an example of something that they're, something good that they're trying to do. So they kept talking about us, and I remember I think this 2 years ago, I got a call from Todd Park, who was then the chief technology officer of the White House, and Todd said, hey, Pete, what are you doing in 2 weeks? I said, anything you want me to. And he said, would you like to come and give a TED Talk to the White House about using open data for our new White House Fellow, Innovation Fellows event? I was like, that sounds great. So there's a video online you can find. I got to talk a little bit about iTriage at the White House. And so that's kind of when things started. And about a year after that, so last year, about this time, on a Friday, I got a email from him saying, give me a call. And he said, hey, the First Lady would like to invite you to the White House for the State of the Union as her guest in the presidential box. And you represent healthcare innovation, entrepreneurship, and doing something good with all this vast amount of data that we have that we're now exposing to the public. And healthcare was kind of a hot ticket item a year ago. And so it was a great experience.
It's still a hot item today.
Yeah, it's going to be for a while.
It's going to be for a while.
Go into healthcare.
Go into healthcare. Well, that's an awesome story. I was going to ask at this point in time if there are any questions from the audience that want to ask Peter anything in particular. Yes, sir.
It's a great question. So we just told them to call us if they needed help. We really looked at it on a very carefully from a product strategy. There's lots of books out there, like Dr. Spock's book is one example of here's what poison ivy is, here's how you treat it, here's when to go to the doctor, that kind of stuff. So we knew that there was information out there that people did use and consume to understand conditions better, and maybe they would use that information to decide whether to seek care or not. So the way we designed the app, we never tell anyone they have anything because we can't. But we know that there's a relation between symptoms and conditions, and there's a relation between conditions and types of doctors that treat those conditions, and that those doctors and facilities are also can be mapped and organized around you. And so, I think, people obviously use the symptom to provider pathway, as we called it, to try to think through the process of whether they can take care of themselves, or they need to call somebody, or they need to go somewhere. But the technology itself is simply relational, and simply creates a relationship between known symptoms and known conditions. And so, we never, ever imply that you have a condition, but if you did have a condition, this is who treats it. And so, I think we were just very, very straightforward with that, and made sure that this was a relational tool. I mean, people use it all the time in the ER or in their doctor's office or talking to a nurse on the phone. There's story after story of that, and they just, they ask better questions because of it, or they can talk to a family member and list side effects that their medication might be causing. I think you could have approached it a lot differently and said, add your symptoms. Here's what we think you have, and here's what we think you should do. But our philosophy is that you should actually make better decisions. And over the course of, hopefully a couple of years, but maybe actually generations, our population will become more intelligent and literate about healthcare. And those relationships will be things that are sort of part of the fabric of your knowledge, just like other things, like what kind of TV you want to buy, or what kind of computer is more desirable for your kids. We don't learn a lot about healthcare, so we thought if you can relate all this stuff and have a very easy to consume technology, that you could make those decisions better yourself, and start to not be a paternalistic provider of information like the healthcare system tends to be, but allow a demand environment to start to gather information and build knowledge. And so that's really how we not really avoided, but we didn't even think that there was a risk, because we didn't consider that people were using it in ways that were paternalistic.
Next question? Yes, sir. Okay, transition from being on your own to being part of a bigger company.
Well, first they plugged these things in the back of our heads, and then I just woke up this morning. It was interesting because we were 30 people when we were acquired, so we're still a very early stage company, and most big companies don't buy early stage companies like that. So it was very unique that they were even thinking about it. As we negotiated sort of joining the organization, we talked very deliberately about walling off the influence that a big company can have on a small company, and allowing us to grow as independently as possible and pursue our business model. So, we never had to, work with providers that were only in network versus out of network. We were focused on things that provided alignment of value between patients, providers, and payers, just naturally, and that sort of, they didn't want to push the patients or the providers out of that. They truly believed that that's, the way to approach the problem from a consumer vantage point. And so we did a lot of things on the front end to make sure that operationally we would be still as independent as possible. And the organization we joined was very committed to that, and that was all the way up to the CEO of the company. So we were very lucky, and we remain lucky in that sense. A lot of times it's the process stuff that starts to filter in, and why did you buy that kind of toilet paper versus this kind? And you didn't run through procurement for that. And we just said, no, sorry, we're not doing that. And then fortunately, when that no got people, interested up the chain, it eventually stopped. And that's, I think, what helps you remain independent and autonomous.
Last question. Yes, sir.
How did you keep your team focused? Because I'm sure as you're growing, there were lots of opportunities to drop or break this new How did you stay focused?
I just tried to go skiing all the time, and then they had to be focused because they're naturally, smart and focused like that. I think when we were acquired, so right now there's like 3 phases of our company, the way I see it. The first phase was, what is our product and what's the business model, and is there a market for it? And so we raised money to prove that, and it worked out, and so Aetna acquired us. The second phase was, essentially us telling Aetna, this is a great business model and we can scale it. We can get a lot more consumers. We can get a lot more providers. We can start to do some work with payers. And our technology can scale. It can work, even if it gets hit millions of times, it can work. And we can create the kind of culture that people are productive and innovative and build great things. And so, we prove that. So we set a bunch of metrics. If you add providers, if you drive revenue, if you add consumers and build that network effect, that would be a success. And so we really sort of focused on proving that out for the 2 years after our acquisition. And I think now we're involved in sort of the whole consumer digital strategy for Aetna, and so we're starting to think, well, Aetna has 23 million members, and they also, we have 11 million consumers that have downloaded our stuff and millions more that hit it on the web. So, how do we serve that whole population? These people need very specific, benefits-driven information, but also are seeking care and doing all the other stuff we do. And they love appointment setting or ER wait times and other stuff. And these people over here, we don't have their benefit information, but we're providing utility to them also. So, I think we've been very focused on what questions we're going to solve and how we build technology that people can use and hopefully use effectively to solve those problems.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
being here
Thank
this
you
evening.
all for being here.
I'd like a big round of applause for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have another, well, we're till 9 o'clock, so if you want to just mingle some more and chat some more, I think Peter's going to be here for the duration. Also, I just at this point again want to thank the folks from Warren Tech for videotaping this evening. It's great. We really enjoy it. And also for Terry from Noble Productions for doing the audio and all my helpers. If you're interested in helping out with Startup Grind, please let me or Colleen know. We can always use some help. We really look forward to seeing you next month, and we'll be here, with Pat Quinlan from Conversant. Will be our guest speaker next month. And like us on Facebook. Colleen, you're going to throw something at me if I don't say that. Please, please, please go to our Facebook page. We're going to have lots of stuff on there, and if you know anybody that wants to participate or come or whatever, please do so. We're trying to do our best to get the word out and build a real strong Startup Grind community. So again, thank you very much for showing up tonight. I really do appreciate it. On behalf of our Startup Grind team and Peter, we really have enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.